The ruins were silent, but the silence was heavy, almost alive. Broken walls leaned against each other like tired giants, and the ground was black with ash. In the middle of this wreckage sat a human. His face was pale, his clothes torn, and his arm wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. He looked weak, but his eyes stayed sharp. He was not alone. Two small alien girls, no older than 10, clung to his side. Their thin fingers held his jacket as if it was the only safe thing left in this world. They were sisters. Their skin was a soft shade of silver, glowing faintly in the shadows, and their large dark eyes shimmered with fear. They did not speak, but the fear in their faces told everything. They had seen too much, they had lost too much, and now they had only him, a human stranger. Outside the ruins, heavy footsteps marched across the blackened streets. Voices carried through the smoke-filled air, low, guttural, and cruel. The alien soldiers were hunting. They were not ordinary soldiers. They belonged to a warlord feared across galaxies. A monster in flesh who enjoyed watching fear more than victory. He had destroyed villages, burned cities, and captured entire species to show his power. And now his soldiers searched for 3 survivors. The human pressed his back against a cracked wall, holding the sisters close. His heart pounded, but he breathed slowly, forcing himself to stay calm. Fear was useless. No. He had no weapon except a rusted metal rod, no plan except survival, and no strength left except his will. The older sister whispered, her voice trembling. They will find us." The human turned his head and looked into her eyes. His voice was quiet, steady, almost gentle. "Not if you stay silent. Not if you trust me." She nodded quickly and pulled the younger sister closer. Somewhere in the distance, the deep roar of flames rose again. The soldiers were burning another building, making sure no one was left alive. The human closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he saw the memory of their mother. He remembered her silver skin marked with blood, her last breath as she had pressed the children into his arms. "Promise me," she had whispered, her voice breaking. "Promise you will keep them safe." And he had promised. Now, in the heart of ruins with death closing in, that promise burned brighter than his fear. A shadow moved near the broken doorway. The human's muscles tightened. A soldier was close. He pressed the sisters lower, hiding them behind broken stone. The younger one whimpered, but he placed a finger on his lips. She bit her lip and stayed quiet. The footsteps grew louder. The soldier's breathing was harsh, almost mechanical. A tall figure stepped into the ruins, scanning the room with glowing red eyes. Its armored hand carried a long weapon, still hot from fire. The human crouched low, gripping the metal rod. His palms were sweaty, but he held it firm. He could hear the soldier's claws scraping against the walls as it searched. The soldier growled in its language, frustrated. It stepped closer to the stones where the sisters hid. Its shadow stretched across them, dark and heavy. The human's heart raced. He could not wait. If the soldier found them, the sisters would die. He prepared to strike. But then, the soldier stopped. Its head turned slowly. It was listening. Outside, another soldier called out, a command. The red eyes blinked, and with a hiss, the creature turned back toward the door. The human held his breath. The sisters did not move. The soldier paused one last time, sniffing the air, then stepped out, leaving only silence behind. The human let out the air he was holding. His hands shook, but he stayed still until he was sure the danger had passed. Then he turned to the sisters. Their eyes were wide, shining with fear and hope at the same time. "We are not safe yet," he whispered, "but we will be. I promise." The ruins groaned as another part of the building collapsed somewhere nearby. Smoke drifted in, and firelight painted the walls orange. The warlord's army was still out there, searching, destroying, waiting. The human tightened his grip on the metal rod. His body was broken, his strength almost gone, but one truth burned inside him like fire. He had promised their mother, and No matter the cost, he would not break that promise. The ruins still burned outside, but inside the broken walls, the human and the two alien sisters waited in silence. The soldier had left, yet the fear remained. Every sound, the crack of fire, the fall of stone, the distant roar of alien voices felt sharp, like a blade pressed against their skin. The older sister pressed her little sibling close to her chest. The younger one shook with quiet sobs, her silver skin glowing faintly in the dark. The human rested his back against the wall, his breath slow and heavy. His body hurt, but pain no longer mattered. Only one thought guided him: keep them safe. He looked at them again. Two fragile children, clinging to him as if he was the only shield left in a cruel world. He was a stranger to their kind, a human. Yet fate had tied their lives together. Suddenly, a low horn echoed across the ruins. It was deep and cold, shaking the ground beneath them. The warlord's signal. The hunt had begun again. The sisters looked at the human with wide eyes. "What does it mean?" the older one whispered. "It means they are closing in," he answered softly. His voice was steady, though his stomach twisted with fear. Outside, more footsteps gathered. The sound was heavier now, more soldiers joining the search. Their cruel voices called out in their language, taunts, threats, promises of pain. The human could not understand every word, but the tone was clear. They would not stop until they found their prey. The sisters trembled. The younger girl finally spoke, her voice weak. Why do you help us? You are not one of us." Human's eyes softened. He remembered again the mother's face, broken and bleeding as she begged him. He remembered the moment he gave his word. "Because I promised your mother," he said. His voice was rough, but his words were true. And a promise is stronger than fear. The girls stayed quiet, but something in their eyes changed. They no longer looked at him as just a stranger. They looked at him as a protector. Another crash came from outside. A wall collapsed somewhere near. The firelight grew brighter and smoke rolled into the ruins. The human coughed, covering his mouth. The air was getting worse. If they stayed too long, the flames would kill them before the soldiers did. He stood up slowly, leaning on the metal rod for balance. His knees shook, but he forced himself to stay upright. "We can't wait here," he whispered. "The fire is spreading. We move now." The sisters looked terrified, but they trusted him. They held his hands tightly as he led them deeper into the ruins, searching for a way out. Every step crunched against ash and stone. Every sound felt like thunder. The human knew the soldiers could hear anything. He paused often, listening, watching the shadows. They reached a collapsed hall. Broken beams hung from the ceiling and smoke poured through cracks in the walls. But beyond the wreckage, there was a faint opening, maybe a path to the outer streets. The human crouched low, scanning the way forward. But then, his heart froze. He saw movement. Two soldiers stood guard near the opening, their glowing red eyes cutting through the smoke. They spoke in low growls, weapons in hand, waiting for anything that moved. The sisters gasped softly, and the younger one clutched his arm. He leaned close to them. "Stay low. Do not make a sound." He crawled forward, pressing his body close to the ash-covered floor. Every movement was slow, careful, silent. The sisters followed, their breaths quick but quiet. The soldiers' shadows stretched long across the hall. Their armor gleamed faintly and their weapons hummed with deadly energy. The human's grip tightened on his metal rod. He knew he could not fight two at once, not in his condition. Not with the sisters so close. His mind raced. He needed a plan. He needed a way to distract them. Then, fate gave him one. A piece of burning wood fell from above, crashing into the floor near the guards. Sparks flew, and the noise made both soldiers turn their heads. For a moment, their eyes moved away. The human seized the chance. He waved the sisters forward, pushing them through the shadows. They crawled fast, slipping behind a pile of rubble just a breath away from the guards. But then, the younger sister coughed. It was small, weak, but in the silence, it was enough. The guards froze. Their heads snapped toward the sound. The human's heart pounded. He pushed the sisters deeper into the rubble and stood, raising the rod in his hand. His muscles screamed in pain, but he stood tall, blocking the soldier's view. The red eyes fixed on him. One soldier growled, stepping closer. The human's body shook, but his voice did not. "You want someone?" he whispered. "Take me." The guard stepped closer, their glowing red eyes locked on the human. Smoke swirled around them, firelight dancing off their black armor. They were taller, stronger, and armed with deadly weapons. He had only a rusted metal rod. Still, he stood, firm, his body trembling but his eyes sharp. Behind him, the two sisters crouched low, hidden in the shadows. Their breaths were quick and shallow, their silver skin glowing faintly in fear. The human shifted slightly, making sure his body blocked the soldier's view of them. One of the aliens let out a deep growl. "Human," it hissed, its voice harsh and metallic. "Weak prey, alone." The other chuckled, raising its weapon. A bright red light pulsed at the end of the barrel. One shot, and he would be ash. The human's grip on the rod tightened. His hands were sweaty, but his heart was steady. He knew what he had to do. The soldiers took another step forward. The human whispered under his breath, not for them, but for himself. "Not today." With sudden force, he swung the rod against the nearest wall. The sound echoed through the ruins, loud and sharp like thunder in the night. The aliens jerked their heads toward the noise, their weapons raising instinctively. In that heartbeat of distraction, the human moved. He lunged forward, striking the first soldier across the face. The metal rod clanged against armor, sparks flying. The alien staggered, roaring in anger. The second soldier spun, weapon ready, but the human slammed his shoulder into it, knocking the barrel away just as it fired. A beam of red energy burned into the wall, blasting stone into dust. The ruins shook with the noise. The sisters gasped, covering their mouths to stay quiet. The first soldier recovered fast. It swung its clawed hand at the human, striking his side. Pain ripped through his body and he stumbled, nearly falling. Blood filled his mouth, but he did not drop the rod. He forced himself up again, breathing hard. The aliens laughed, cruel and confident. To them, this was sport. A weak human could never win. But the human was not fighting for victory. He was fighting for the promise. He swung the rod again, aiming for the joints in their armor. The strike connected with the second soldier's knee. A crack rang out, and the creature fell to one side, howling. The human didn't stop. He hit, again and again, each strike fueled by desperation, each blow harder than the last. The first soldier roared and raised its weapon, aiming directly at him. The sisters saw it. The younger one let out a small cry, unable to hold it back. The alien turned its head at the sound. Just for a moment, the human saw his chance. He spun, swinging the rod with all his strength. The metal smashed into the alien's weapon, knocking it from its hands. The gun clattered across the floor, sliding into the rubble. The soldier growled in rage, charging at him barehanded. The human braced himself, but the impact was brutal. The alien's claws tore across his shoulder, blood spraying. He fell to the ground, vision flashing white. The sisters almost screamed, but the older one pressed her hand over the younger's mouth. They could only watch as their protector struggled. The alien raised its claw again, ready to end him. But the human rolled aside at the last second, grabbing a piece of broken stone from the ground. With a shout, he slammed it against the soldier's head. The force cracked its helmet, sending it stumbling back. The second soldier tried to rise, limping, growling in fury. The human gritted his teeth, lifted the rod once more, and struck down, hard on its head. The alien collapsed with a thud, motionless. Breathless, covered in blood and ash, the human turned to face the first soldier again. It was dazed, helmet cracked, smoke hissing from its armor. They locked eyes, human and monster. Weak flesh against armored giant. The alien roared and charged again. The human waited, heart pounding. At the last moment, he stepped aside and drove the rod into a crack in the creature's armor. The alien screamed, thrashing wildly before collapsing to its knees. The human yanked the rod free and swung one last time, striking the side of its head. The soldier fell with a heavy crash, still at last. Silence filled the ruins again, broken only by the crackle of fire. The human dropped the rod, his hands shaking, his body broken and bleeding. He staggered back, pressing one hand against his wound. From the shadows, the sisters rushed out, their eyes wide with shock and fear. The younger one grabbed his arm, tears falling down her glowing cheeks. You saved us." The human looked at them, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Despite the pain, a faint smile touched his lips. "I promised," he whispered. Outside, more footsteps echoed in the distance. The fight had been loud, too loud. The warlord's army was coming, and the real battle had only just begun. The ruins were quiet again, but the silence was not safety. It was the silence before a storm. The two alien soldiers lay broken on the ground, their armor cracked, their glowing eyes dim. Smoke curled around their lifeless bodies. The human stood over them, chest heaving, blood dripping from a fresh wound on his shoulder. His hands shook as he gripped the metal rod, now bent and stained with dark fluid. He wanted to fall, to rest, but there was no time. The fight had been loud, too loud. Every strike, every roar, every blast had carried through the ruins. The warlord's army would come. The sisters rushed to him, their small hands tugging at his arm. The younger one's eyes were full of tears. "You're hurt," she whispered. The human crouched low, forcing a weak smile. "I've been hurt before," he said softly. "But you two, you must not stop. You must keep moving." The older sister shook her head. "We can't leave you. You saved us." His face grew serious. "I didn't save you yet. More are coming. We have to go." The sisters nodded, though their fear was clear. Together they slipped deeper into the ruins, stepping over rubble and ash. The human limped, his body screaming with pain, but his spirit burned hotter than fire. As they moved, the deep sound of the warlord's horn boomed again. It was closer now, vibrating through the stone walls. The human clenched his teeth. The warlord was calling his hunters. They reached a narrow hall that twisted toward a half-buried tunnel. The human remembered it, an old escape route built during the colony's early days. Maybe it would lead them out. But before they could enter, a shadow blocked their path. Another soldier stepped forward, taller than the others, its armor gleaming with cruel symbols. Its weapon hummed with deadly energy, aimed directly at them. The sisters froze. The human stepped in front of them, rod raised. His arm trembled, but his eyes were steady. The soldier let out a harsh laugh. "One human against us all," it growled. "You cannot win." The human spat blood on the ground and whispered, "I don't need to win. I just need to keep them safe." The soldier lunged forward. The human blocked the strike with the rod, the impact sending shock through his bones. He stumbled, but held firm. The sisters clung to each other, watching in horror. The fight was brutal. The soldier's strength was overwhelming, every blow heavier than stone. The human dodged when he could, deflected when he could not. His arms burned, his body failing, but he refused to fall. Every strike of his rod was slower now, but every strike carried his defiance. Finally, the soldier grabbed him by the throat, lifting him off the ground. The rod clattered to the floor. The sisters screamed. The soldier snarled, pressing its claws tighter. "You will die, and they will belong to the warlord." The human's face turned red, his breath fading. Yet his eyes still burned with fire. With the last of his strength, he reached to his belt and pulled out a sharp piece of broken metal. With one desperate motion, he drove it into the soldier's neck. The creature roared, dropping him. It staggered back, choking on its own dark blood. The human gasped for air, crawling toward the rod. He grabbed it and, with a shout that was more rage than strength, swung hard at the soldier's head. The crack echoed through the ruins. The alien fell, still and silent. The human collapsed to his knees, coughing, his vision swimming. The sisters, ran to him, wrapping their arms around his battered body. "You're going to die," the older one whispered, tears in her eyes. He shook his head weakly. "Not yet. Not while you need me." But then a sound froze them all. A voice, deep, cruel, echoing through the ruins. "You think you can hide my prey, human?" The sisters shivered. The human's body tensed. He knew that voice. Everyone knew that voice. The warlord. From the shadows, the warlord stepped into view. His armor was massive, black and red, carved with marks of conquest. His eyes glowed brighter than fire, and his presence alone seemed to crush the air. Behind him, more soldiers marched, their weapons ready. The sisters clung to the human, trembling. He rose slowly, his body broken, his rod bent, but he stood. His legs wavered, but his will did not. The warlord looked at him and laughed, a sound like thunder. "A weak human dares to defy me. You could not save your own kind, and now you protect mine?" The human raised his rod. His voice was low but firm. "I made a promise." The warlord tilted his head. "Then your promise will be your grave." The soldiers spread out, firelight reflecting in their weapons. The ruins shook under their march. The human's grip tightened. The sisters pressed closer, their eyes wide, with terror. The warlord stepped forward, his shadow falling over them like a storm, and the human, bleeding and broken, lifted his rod and whispered to himself. The warlord's laugh echoed through the ruins, deep and cruel. It rolled across the broken walls like thunder, shaking the hearts of anyone who heard it. The sisters clung to the human's side, their small hands gripping his torn jacket. Their glowing eyes filled with fear, but also with something else. Hope. Hope that the human would not break, even in front of a monster. The human stood, swaying on weak legs. His rod was bent, his body cut and bleeding, but he did not lower it. His chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, yet his eyes stayed sharp. He had no illusions. The warlord was stronger, faster, and armed with more soldiers. But he had something they did not. A promise. The warlord stepped closer, his heavy boots cracking the stone underfoot. His armor glowed faintly red as if fire lived inside it. "You think one broken human can stop me?" His voice was like iron scraping across stone. "You couldn't protect your own people. What makes you think you can protect mine?" The human gripped the rod tighter. His throat ached, his body screamed, but he forced the words out. "Because I promised, and I will die before I break it." The warlord tilted his head. For a moment, silence hung in the smoke-filled air. Then, he raised his hand. "Burn it all." His soldiers obeyed. Flames spread across the ruins, crawling along the broken walls, devouring wood and stone alike. Thick smoke filled the air, choking and blinding. The sisters coughed, tears running down their faces as the fire pressed closer. The human grabbed, their hands pulling them back into the shadows. The firelight painted the ruins orange and red, and heat pressed against their skin like a living beast. He staggered forward, searching for another way out. The ruins groaned as more walls collapsed. Sparks rained from above, falling like burning stars. The sisters clung to him tighter, stumbling as the ground shook beneath their feet. The human's lungs burned. Every breath was heavy, every step harder than the last, but he did not stop. He forced his body to move, guiding the sisters through the chaos. Behind them, the warlord's voice thundered through the flames. "Run, little human. Run while the fire eats you alive. There is no escape." The sisters looked back in terror, but the human pulled them forward. "Don't look," he whispered. "Keep going." They stumbled into a wide chamber where the roof had caved in. The night sky peeked through the broken ceiling, stars barely visible through the smoke. There was a chance here, if he could find a path out, they might survive. But more soldiers dropped into the chamber, their armor glowing red in the firelight. They formed a line, blocking the exit. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. The human froze, pulling the sisters behind him. His body trembled. His strength was nearly gone. He could not fight them all. The soldiers raised their weapons. The warlord's voice echoed again, closer now. "Surrender, and I may spare the little ones." Defy me, and they will burn with you." The sisters looked at the human, their eyes wide and wet with tears. They were too young to understand war, but they understood one thing. He had promised. The human's grip on the rod tightened. He planted his feet on the broken floor, his body shaking but unbent. He looked at the soldiers and whispered almost to himself, "Not while I breathe." The soldiers moved forward. The human braced himself for the end. Then, something unexpected happened. From above, part of the burning ceiling collapsed, crashing down between the human and the soldiers. Flames and smoke surged, scattering the aliens back. The chamber filled with chaos, shouts, and fire. The human did not waste the chance. He grabbed the sisters and pulled them toward a narrow tunnel revealed by the falling debris. It was dark, small, barely wide enough for them to crawl, but it was a way out. "Go," he whispered urgently. "Crawl fast, don't stop." The sisters dropped to the ground and slipped into the tunnel. The human followed, dragging himself through the narrow space. The heat pressed close and smoke filled his throat, but he pushed on. Behind them, the warlord roared in rage. The sound shook the stones. His soldiers shouted, their voices echoing in the fire. The human could feel their fury chasing him through the dark. But in that moment, he also felt something else. For the first time since the ruins fell, he felt hope. The tunnel led somewhere, maybe freedom, maybe survival. The sisters crawled ahead of him, their small forms glowing faintly in the dark. Their breaths were quick, but they kept moving, trusting him to guide them. The human dragged his battered body after them, every motion a battle. His wounds bled, his lungs burned, but he did not stop. He could not stop, because the promise was not broken yet, and until it was, he would fight, crawl, and bleed to keep it alive. The tunnel seemed endless. The human crawled through the dark with the sisters just ahead of him. The walls pressed close, scraping his arms and shoulders as he dragged himself forward. Smoke seeped into the passage, making his lungs burn. Every breath felt like fire, every motion like knives cutting into his muscles. But he did not stop. He could not. The faint glow of the sisters' silver skin lit the tunnel, guiding him forward. They moved quickly, despite their fear, because they trusted him. And trust was something he could not betray. Finally, the tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller but still broken from the destruction above. A shaft of moonlight fell through a crack in the roof, painting the ground pale. The air here was cooler, cleaner. For a moment they could breathe again. The sisters collapsed onto the floor, gasping. The younger one clung to her sister, her small body trembling. The older one looked at the human with wide eyes. Did we escape?" The human leaned against the wall, holding his bleeding shoulder. His chest rose and fell, every breath heavy. He wanted to tell them yes, he wanted to believe it himself. But deep inside he knew better. The answer came sooner than he hoped. The ground shook. A heavy impact rolled through the chamber, followed by another and another. Dust rained from the cracked ceiling. The sisters huddled close, eyes wide in terror. The human pushed himself upright, grabbing his bent rod once more. From the shadows of the chamber's far side, a massive figure stepped forward. The warlord. He was even larger up close, his black and red armor glowing like molten rock. His eyes shone with cruel fire, and his presence filled the chamber like a storm. Behind him, soldiers lined the tunnel, their weapons glowing, their growls echoing in the dark. The warlord's laugh rolled through the chamber, deep and cold. "You thought a tunnel could hide you? You thought you could steal from me, human?" The sisters whimpered, pressing against the human's side. He raised the rod, though his arm shook and his body bent under its weight. The warlord tilted his head, amused. "Look at you, broken, bleeding, barely standing. Yet you still hold up that stick as if it means anything. Tell me, human. Why?" The human's lips were dry, his throat raw, but he forced the words out. "Because I promised." The warlord stepped closer, his armor glowing hotter. "A promise." He laughed again, a sound like iron breaking stone. Your kind makes promises like children make drawings, weak and meaningless. My kind makes power. My kind makes fear. The human steadied his grip on the rod. His voice was soft, but steady. Power dies. Fear fades. A promise lives until it's kept. The warlord's smile twisted into a snarl. Then your promise ends tonight. With a roar, he raised his massive blade. The weapon hummed, glowing red like fire made solid. The sisters screamed and held, each other tight. The human stepped forward. His body shook with pain, his vision blurred with blood and smoke, but he stood between the warlord and the children. His shadow stretched long in the moonlight, thin but unbroken. The soldiers behind the warlord growled, eager for blood. The firelight from the tunnel made their armor shine. The chamber seemed smaller now, crushed by heat, smoke, and fear. But the human did not step back. He planted his feet firmly on the cracked stone. He raised the bent rod high like a knight with a sword. The warlord paused, watching him. His fiery eyes narrowed. Do you truly think you can stop me? The human's breath came slow, heavy. He whispered, almost to himself, but loud enough to be heard. I don't need to stop you, I just need to hold you back long enough for them to live. The warlord roared in fury and charged. The chamber shook with his steps, his blade cutting, the air like lightning. The sisters screamed. The human tightened his grip, his heart pounding like a drum. For a moment the world slowed. The fire, the fear, the shadow of the blade. And then, with every last ounce of strength left in his broken body, the human swung his rod against the coming storm. The clash rang out, loud and sharp, echoing through the ruins. Sparks lit the chamber, fire and metal colliding. The scene froze in chaos, a broken man defying a monster, two sisters watching with wide, tear-filled eyes, and a promise burning brighter than fear. The battle had begun, and only one. Truth remained. No matter what came next, this human would not fall without defiance. The warlord's blade crashed against the human's bent rod with a force like thunder. Sparks burst into the air, and the shockwave rattled the broken chamber. The sisters screamed, their small hands clinging to each other as they watched the clash of giant and mortal. The human staggered back, his arm shaking, his shoulder bleeding. The rod bent even further under the impact, but he refused to drop it. He planted his feet, breathing hard, his eyes burning with the same fire that had carried him this far. The warlord laughed, deep and cruel. Pathetic. You think your weak flesh can resist me? I will break you, human, and when you fall, these children will be mine. The human spit blood on the stone floor. His voice came out low, ragged, but steady. Not while I breathe. The warlord roared and swung again, his blade cutting through the air like a storm. The human barely blocked, the force throwing him to the ground. His rod cracked, splitting near the middle. He coughed, struggling to rise. The sisters cried out, but he raised one trembling hand, signaling them to stay back. He would not let them be touched. The warlord stepped closer, towering above him. You cannot win. Surrender, and I may let them live as slaves. Resist, and they will burn with you. The human's chest heaved, his vision blurred. Every part of his body begged him to fall. But then he saw the sisters, their silver skin glowing faintly, their wide eyes filled with trust in him, trust in his promise, and something inside him refused to die. With a growl that was more pain than strength, he forced himself to stand. He lifted the cracked rod again, holding it high. You will not touch them, he whispered. The warlord snarled and charged. Their weapons clashed again and again, rod against blade, weak against strong. Every impact rang like a bell, echoing through the chamber. The human's arms bled, his back burned, but he fought on, each strike driven by his vow. Then, in a flash of fire, the warlord's blade struck true. The rod shattered, broken in two. The pieces clattered to the floor. The human fell to one knee, gasping. He had no weapon left. The warlord raised his blade high, his voice filled with triumph. It ends now! But as the blade came down, the human moved. He rolled forward, grabbing one of the broken rod pieces. With desperate strength, he plunged it into a gap in the warlord's armor, right beneath the chest plate. The warlord roared in shock and rage. The sisters gasped, their eyes wide. The human twisted the broken rod deeper, his face twisted with pain and fury. The warlord staggered, but his strength was immense. He slammed his armored fist into the human, sending him crashing against the wall. Blood spilled from the man's mouth, and he slid to the floor, weak and broken. The warlord ripped the rod piece out of his armor. Black blood dripped onto the ground, sizzling like acid. He snarled, stepping toward the sisters. "You will watch him die," he growled. The sisters screamed, backing away. But the human wasn't done. With the last spark of life in his body, he pushed himself up. His legs shook, his vision dimmed, but he stood. He reached for the warlord's discarded weapon, the massive blade glowing red on the floor. Somehow, with trembling hands, he lifted it. The warlord turned in surprise just as the human charged. With a cry that echoed louder than the flames, the human drove the blade upward into the warlord's chest. The chamber shook. Sparks and black fire erupted as the weapon cut through armor. The warlord roared, thrashing, his massive form collapsing to one knee. His glowing eyes flickered, dimming. The human pressed forward, forcing the blade deeper until the warlord finally fell, his massive body crashing into the stone with a thunderous sound. The chamber went silent, except for the crackle of fire. The sisters stared, stunned. The human stood over the fallen warlord, the giant blade still in his hands. His body trembled, his wounds bleeding freely, but his eyes stayed on the children. He dropped the weapon, stumbling toward them. He fell too, his knees, and the sisters rushed into his arms. "You did it," the older one whispered, tears on her glowing cheeks. "You beat him." The human smiled faintly, his breath shallow. "No," he whispered. "We beat him. Together." The younger sister clung to him tightly. "Don't leave us," she begged. His hand rested gently on her head. His voice was soft. "I promised, and a promise is kept." Outside, the fires still burned and soldiers still roared in the distance. The warlord's empire was not gone, but in that chamber under the pale moonlight something had changed. A human, broken and alone, had stood against a monster. He had fought for 2 alien children who were not his own, and he had won. The sisters held him close, their hope reborn, and as the night carried on, the legend of a single human's defiance had begun.